Hi, everybody. My name is Nathan Aswell. Welcome to Small Steps, Big Life, a show in which I like to have conversations with people that are living fantastic, big, juicy, interesting lives and getting them to share with us how they got there one small step at a time. My guest today is someone who's just come into my life quite recently through a mutual friend. Her name is Evelyn McKelvie, and boy, has she got an amazing story to share. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thank you, Nathan.
No pressure. You and I were lucky enough to be at a dinner party last week, and I got a chance to hear a little bit about you firsthand. I had heard about you through our mutual friend, Sophie. And it was just delightful to be sitting next to you at the table and to just, get that proverbial look under the corner of the rug or whatever, and just to learn a little bit more about you. So I just thought, we have to have a conversation in this format so more people get to know more about you. So let's just back up a little bit before we kind of get into the main the juice of what we're going to talk about today and what your passion is. Let's just go back a little bit. Tell people where you're from. You're initially from Ontario, right? Or are you?
I was born in Toronto, but I grew up in Winnipeg.
Okay.
And I moved to the West Coast as a young married mother many years ago.
Wow.
And didn't look back except for once.
Right.
Which is part of the story, but
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, what we want you to know about Evelyn is she is an equine coach. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't come across equine coaches very often. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and how Evelyn got to walk that path and was involved in walking that path. So as I'm fond of starting with Evelyn, there was obviously some experience you had that kind of was a big aha or a turning point. Mm-hmm. What was that? Well, and feel free certainly to lead up to that in whatever way that kind of made that moment even more important when it did happen. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan.
You're welcome.
There was a big moment, a big aha, like a lightning bolt, but it was preceded by a painful period in my life where over the period of a couple of years, I lost everything. So I had found the job of my dreams. I was doing well at it. I was respected and doing a good job. And I bought my first home, and I got reorganized, and I ended up being reorganized out. And so this was in the mid-90s here on the West Coast. And so it resulted in me over a couple of years, struggling to find as good a job with a good salary. And in fact, I did some consulting. I tried my hand at everything. And it just wasn't sticking, and it wasn't giving me back any real satisfaction. And so I went through a period of time where, it was like this door closes, that door closes, that door closes, and waiting patiently for the right door to open, sometimes not so patiently. And so one day the door that opened was for me to go to Ontario to work with a company that needed some help in a massive reorganization and repositioning their business model. And so as much as I didn't really want to go back to Ontario, that's where I went. Because I knew it was going to be a great job career-wise. So back I went in February, if you can imagine leaving Vancouver in February and going to Toronto.
I feel your pain.
That's what happened, and that was 1998. And so as I was reorienting and getting used to what my new role was and where I was living, I decided I needed something outside of work to really, provide that counterbalance to the intensity of the job that I was doing. And also because I didn't know very many people. So I decided I was going to take riding lessons because I'd always wanted to do the BAMF horseback riding vacation. And I thought it would be cool if I knew how to ride and wasn't scared beyond my wits.
Can you just slide apart for a minute? Can you tell people about that BAMF experience? Because I've never heard of it.
Oh, well, I haven't done it yet. But
okay.
if you Google BAMF horseback riding, you can find lots of opportunities to get on the horseback and take a guided, several days or a week-long trip through the mountains.
Wow.
It's just,
Wow.
oh yeah, it looks like a dream come true. Those pictures of the big, picturesque, staggeringly beautiful mountains.
Yeah.
And sitting on top of a horse.
Wow.
So that was the vision that I had for myself. That was going to be my big reward one day.
Okay.
And so I signed up for riding lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been on a horse a couple of times, once or, a couple of times when I was younger.
Yep.
But I didn't really know anything about them. And so that lesson, at the end of that lesson, I got off that horse and I'd had this road to Damascus experience of just a profound physical, spiritual shift that I could not describe to anybody. I couldn't even begin to talk about it with anybody. It was just a complete internal awakening. And a lot of it was awakening physically, spiritually, and my intuition, which I had been searching for during those several years leading up to that, waiting for that right door to open and feeling like I had really no connection with my intuition. So that's really what started me down this path. And so what I did while I was working at this company for a year and a half, I signed up and I started taking lessons 3 times a week and just doing as much as I could, talking to everybody I could about horses and riding and what was the best way to do this and what was the answer to that question. And as I was doing that, I started paying attention to how I liked or evaluated the answers too. Because what I was noticing about being around horses was that everybody had an opinion about the right way to do something. And there could be vastly different ways of answering any question. And so I decided, along with this really physically felt reawakening of my intuition, I was going to pay a lot more attention to my intuition, even though I was a complete novice. So I was going to suspend judgment and, just soak it all up until I could make my own assessment of everything I was learning. And I also, in that moment, had the desire to have other people have this experience. I've been a manager for many years, and I had been a manager for many years when I lost that job. And it was always one of the joys in my work was to see people find their real calling. So I love developing people, getting them trained, helping them, even if they had to leave and go somewhere else. If that was the right thing for them, that was going to support their journey, then I was all for it. So I had this idea, I got to do something. My next career was going to be something to do with horses and people, putting them together and evoking this kind of amazing aha opportunity that I had had. So there didn't seem to be a job such as what I was describing, so I didn't have a name for that either at the time. So I just stumbled along as I, one step in front of the other, seeking out teachers and waiting for the information and the feeling and the skills and the expertise to come.
And this is all, you're still in Toronto when all this is going on?
Yeah, this was 1998. Yeah.
Okay, and so you're reaching out to people, you're finding people to give you more information, mentors, etc.
Yeah, and at the same time that this was going on with the horses, I was working in an environment that was really tough, competitive, high level of stress and sales environment, and a pretty dysfunctional setup, particularly because this company was trying to change its business model. So there was a lot of resistance with the people in the company, who many been there for many years, and the partners were struggling to deal with the people in the resistance. And so what I was noticing was what I was getting from being with the horses and learning about myself. And I was applying it in the office. Not by saying anything about horses to people, but I was seeing the horses compete for water and hay, in the field. And it was the same kind of competition behavior in the office, but between the salesmen and women. Seeing people struggle and jockey for power and position at work was the same kind of jockeying for position that I was seeing with the horses when they were together in a herd. So I learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot from people and the horses this way.
And so I love that analogy of you noticing the parallel between the horses and the salesmen. So this goes on for a time, and so this you're growing in your awareness of this because you're getting more and more sensitive to seeing the parallels.
Well, and I was starting to realize that some behavior, the things that at times confused me about people or frustrated me about people, had to do with the fact we can cover up what's really going on. Some of us cover up better than others, but horses don't lie. They don't have any other agenda. What you see is what you get when you're with horses. And that's not always true with people. So something I was fascinated by was studying horses as mammals and learning a lot about humans through the fact that we share, a lot of the same instincts and needs. Horses are very social. They require family or tribal or band mates, just like we're social. Some of them less so than others. They form very, very strong bonds, and they have, enemies. So, other horses they don't get along with. So, and they switch sides. They're a lot like adolescent kids in school. That sort of, he's my best friend. No, he's not. You're my best friend, and why can't I be your best friend? And those kinds of behaviors.
So you're reading about this and beginning to experience it as well?
I was lucky in that the place that I started working or riding in Ontario, it was north of Markham. So they had a couple of big pastures where the horses were allowed out to, play and eat. And so they had a lot of room to be themselves. And so when they're out there together, it's very different than watching horses in a barn situation.
Right.
Or where they always have a fence between them and their neighbor. So this was watching horses be horses much more naturally.
And so you would, I'm assuming that, you're doing this reading and then you would just have this afternoon or some period of time where you would just sit and watch to see if you could see what you had read about? Or
I'd see things and be curious about them, and ask people and look for books and read about it. And in fact, a lot of what's written is not it's not really accurate. A lot of what's written about horses is projection. I think more research is being done now with horses in, say, wild bands, and showing their real behavior. So that, like, just for example, the traditional model is that it's a stallion with his harem. And that's the way they've been described forever. But in fact, it's not the case. It would appear that there's an alpha mare with her lieutenants. And it's similar to elephants. So they live in matriarchal family groups. There is a stallion, but his job is more to be like the bouncer or the security guard. He's obviously the one who's going to breed, but he doesn't have the control over the females that, the traditional model would indicate. So recent research on a wild herd down in Colorado is showing that the mares won't necessarily mate with the stallion who is part of their band. They will if they don't want that stallion, they'll fight him off, and they'll sneak off and find a stallion they want. And then they may come back and rejoin the band, having been impregnated with somebody else. So what you see when you're looking at these animals is really more of a projection of what's going on in your own mind. And when you start to really dig into it and look at the research, then the real situation starts to manifest. And that's one of the things that I find fascinating about animals in general, but horses in particular.
So your awareness of all this is growing, both on the page and just your insatiable hunger sounds like for just more information, both in the books and your observation, and just asking anybody and everybody that you can. And then what happened?
Well, then I decided I couldn't stay in Ontario, so I ended up going to Calgary and living with friends and going back to school to do a computer programming diploma. And those friends are part of my story in terms of getting help, which I had a lot of help. So I was in an immersive program in Calgary, learning programming, and with the intention of getting back to Vancouver. So I did make it back to Vancouver. I was offered a job at UBC managing the support center. And so came back to Vancouver in 2000. And all the while, spending my extra time and money on riding lessons and studying. So in Calgary, I rode at a couple of different places. So, it was just fascinating to have different teachers, ride different horses, be around different cultures, different ways of seeing things. And then when I moved back to Vancouver, before I even looked for an apartment, I went and looked for a place to ride. So I found a place down in Southlands in Vancouver, which is a miraculous little community in the heart of Vancouver, across the river from the airport. And so it's a horse community. And that's where I started riding and continued my search for, always in the back of my mind, how am I going to turn this into the thing that I want to make it, which is to bring horses and people together and have this fascinating learning opportunity. So
so that seed had already was that seed planted before you left Ontario?
Yeah, really the very first lesson back in 1998, I was like, this is my next career. And I want to do something with people and horses together, but I don't know how that's going to look. I didn't know what that job description was. And I didn't want to be a therapist. I didn't want to go back to school and become a psychologist or a therapist. I wanted to do something that was from a different perspective, which is ultimately how I became an executive coach. When I came back to Vancouver, I'd been exposed to a couple of coaches, but I didn't know a lot about the profession. And eventually I realized that was a role that I could take. I could be trained as an executive coach in the skills and the mindset and understanding what coaching really was. And I could take my skill with horses and create a learning space for people who wanted coaching.
Wow.
And then I had to figure out, how does that work? So by this time, there were a lot of people who were starting to get into this kind of a business more from a healing perspective. Most people were doing from a healing perspective. And then Linda Kohanov wrote a book, I think in 2002, called The Tao of Equus, which is the way of the horse. And so she catapulted that whole concept of horses as partners much more into the eyes of regular people, more horse people than regular people. So what I was doing by this time was I was developing a certain amount of knowing what I knew and knowing what I didn't know, instead of all of it being, I don't know anything and I don't even know what I don't know.
Right.
So I was moving into the zone of knowing some things and knowing more about what I didn't know. And looking more with, I guess, more pointedness around who was going to be my teachers, who were going to be my teachers, and starting to differentiate between people that I thought brought something authentic to the experience instead of another projection. So what I see a lot of around horses, and especially, well, in North America, I guess, is there's a great deal of expectation for horses to learn how to understand us. And that's often called natural horsemanship. And less of a real effort for us to understand them and deal with them from their perspective. So what I was finding was that shift was really important in my mind to the model that I wanted to introduce as a coach. Yeah. Because, and also as a manager. So if I'm working with people and if I'm a leader, I need to not project my views onto people that I'm leading. I really need to understand their views and their perspective. And I need to be able to speak to their motivation, their level of engagement. Yeah. And so that was important to me in terms of what took me down the road that I went.
And sorry, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, so I'll remember my question. Please go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, my question was, when you're talking about at this point, talking about teachers, are you talking about other people who are incorporating these two elements, coaching? And,
yes.
Okay. Because
you're
the first person I've ever met who does this, I'm seeing you as a trailblazer, or one of a small, relatively small group of trailblazers who are combining these two things. Is that not the case? Have many come before you and I'm just not aware of them because this is a whole new world to me and to people watching? Or
well, let me put it this way. A lot of people are entering the stream now. When I started, there were maybe a handful of people in the world who were doing work of this sort with other people. They weren't doing it as executive coaches. They were doing it from a coaching perspective, usually more of a life coach perspective, or as a therapy, healing with horses. Right. And so, and that, as I say, wasn't really what I wanted to do. I was really attracted to the executive coaching model, and I think this is true for life coaching and other forms, where we assume our clients are full, empowered, complete, and whole individuals who have a particular goal or path that they want to go down, and they want a thinking partner or a supporting hand, if you will, in exploring and finding the path and overcoming obstacles, identifying and overcoming obstacles. So, but also the other part of it that is particularly different is the way that I deal with the horse. That is trailblazing. I think there was only one other person who I think started this, and I don't think she stayed in the business. And what I mean by that is, for me, I've spent a lot of time finding there are two teachers that I have who, from my perspective, have brought a huge amount of value, which is they learned about horses from horses, not from people. And because they weren't trained by other horse people, they came into it with the mind of a child, sort of, questioning everything and looking at from a fresh perspective. And that fresh perspective took them into a completely different route of how to handle or train or ride horses. And it's, again, from the horse perspective. So I've incorporated their viewpoints and their perspectives into the way that I work with horses. And I teach my clients enough about how horses communicate that they understand how to be with a horse in a polite, respectful way. And then I act as a translator if the horse behaves in a certain way and they don't understand that behavior.
I remember one of the things that struck me from our conversation over dinner last week was you talking about how intelligent horses are.
Yeah.
That people don't have any, and how the way that people are usually trained is to believe that horses, what was the phrase someone else at the table said? That one of the first things that is learned in the usual way is, to show them who's boss.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So just radically different from what you're talking about.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's another end of the spectrum in which many people are going, which I also don't subscribe to, which is the idea that we're in a partnership or that they are teachers, because horses, for the most part, don't really have a choice. There are very few people who, even in doing this kind of work, who have horses who have a choice. We keep them as captive animals, and they know that. They have to, for the most part, unless you've got a ton of land out in the country somewhere, they have to earn their keep in some way. So, and that's riding lessons, trail riding, or doing this kind of work. So, but horses have a different survival strategy than us. And that informs a lot of the differences between horses and us. And they also have a different body language than us. So that's a part of the work that I've done to become skilled at bringing people and horses together in what I consider to be a more authentic way.
I'd love to hear you talk more about those two things.
Okay, yeah. Well, for example, I also help owners with their horses who are, if they're struggling. And on Monday, I worked with a woman that I first worked with about 1.5 years ago, who had a big mare, a female, really big horse, probably 1,300 pounds, and quite a tall horse. So, when we're talking about managing an animal of that size, you're talking about more fraught with danger if the horse is not under control. And in fact, this woman had the horse for a couple of years, and the behavior was getting worse all the time. And she had been advised by a couple of people, sell the horse, send the horse to slaughter, the horse is dangerous. And she really didn't want to do that. She'd even brought in a riding instructor who took the horse into the arena and tried to work with it. The horse objected. And so he ended up whipping her, which is the whole issue of dominance. So if I can't control this animal, I'm going to whip the animal. And so it's afraid of me. And that's how I will learn to control. And of course, this is a real alpha mare who she'd rather die than let that guy win. Wow. Which is, the role of a good alpha mare. And the real leaders or alphas in the horse world are a small number. It's like the 80-20 rule. There's a small number who are the real leaders and a small number who are the followers. And the other ones in between are all competing for their position. So she was one of those horses. She was not going to give it up for anybody. And so this woman called me, and I went out and met them, and I could see the behavior, and I could see that it was a bad situation. So I took the horse's lead. I asked, can I work with this horse for a minute? So I stood beside her using her body language. We went for a walk. She was completely compliant, happy to see me. She gave me a look of like, where have you been? Nobody here knows how to speak like you do. So she was a perfectly polite, lovely mare who would be happy to behave for you if you would behave for her. So what, many people, most people, and the method that I've learned is not widely understood and widely known. Most of the time when we're around horses, without that special sensitivity and knowledge, we're being rude to them. And they have to put up with a lot of rudeness from us. And so typically, they eventually try to get back at you. They'll step on your foot, knock you over, bite, that sort of thing. So they're highly intelligent from the perspective of what their survival strategies are and their social structure. I'm
curious to hear what you mean when you say you use your body language. What you assume the horse's body language, I think, is what you said.
Yeah. Well, horses are very sensitive in the head zone. And what most people do, or are trained to do, is go out and catch the horse and, put the halter on. So, there's a lot of energy directed at the horse's head, which is, against their natural instinct. They will invite you in, but if you push into their heads, then they take that as being a bit rude and aggressive. So to go for what I did with this mare was I stood at her shoulder. I sent energy to her flank, which is to send energy to that part of her body that will motivate her to move forward. And this is how they do. This is how they do it with each other. And I did not pull her, but I pushed her forward to walk with me. I was very careful about, not getting into her headspace, not pulling in any way, and giving her the time to agree to come along and the time to stop when I asked her to stop. And just generally being very much more sensitive to her body and her responses to me. So when you stop pulling a horse, then you have to do something different, because pulling is one of the forms of domination that we use to keep horses under control, because it makes us feel safer. We put all that leather on their head and a lead line. And you'll often see people go bang, bang, bang with the lead line under the horse's head. If a horse does something they consider to be wrong, that's a way of punishing the horse. And that's very hurtful to them because they're very sensitive in this part of their face. So when you've got a halter across here, bang, 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 it's like punching you in the nose a few times.
And I'm also curious when you say, you're pushing a horse, how do you do that if you're standing beside it?
Using energy. It's using chi.
Wow.
Horses are incredibly sensitive, and some people think they actually see our aura, our energetic field. And in fact, that's the kind of thing that science is starting to measure now. So we've got an electromagnetic field that emits from our heart and our brain. Horses have a much larger one, like 50 times greater than the electromagnetic field of a person. So they're very sensitive. And of course, people know that about horses, that they pick up information from us, seemingly psychically. Riders will talk about, all I have to do is think about a canter and my horse will pick up a canter. Wow. So there's no evidence really to say that it's psychic, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they do read and feel our energy, and that we do communicate with them using our energy. And so that's one of the things that I work a lot with people. So, coming into contact with a horses will give you immediate feedback about how they feel about your energy or your body language.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that so much of this was an internal process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you spoke briefly about this woman that you worked with earlier this week. Excuse me.
Yeah, so I started working with her about 1.5 years ago. And I didn't work very consistently, but I think we had about 8 or 12 sessions together, and then a break. She had a lot going on in her life at home. But she called me, I guess a little over 6 weeks ago, and asked me to come back and work with them. And when I went to see them, it was like 2 different people. The relationship was incredibly changed. This horse loved this woman, was completely respectful, would go anywhere with her, whereas previously the horse was just dragging her around because she had the weight to do it. and the woman had no ability to stop her because of the weight differential. And she didn't have the internal energy to say, no, you're not going to do that. So it was just beautiful to watch them. So I was really doing some fine tuning of the body language with her to get them. So they were walking together out in a big arena, shoulder to shoulder, no ropes, no nothing. And this horse is just glommed onto her like a magnet. While she turns left and turns right and makes a big circle, and the horse is just following her like a puppy dog. It's just beautiful.
So when you work with people, is it one-on-one and in groups, and just tell us more about that, because when I'm hearing you say executive coach, I guess I'm thinking of weekend or week-long experiences, but it's much more than that. It sounds like it's much more flexible than that.
Yeah, I as an executive coach, it all it really means is my market is people from the workplace who have perhaps issues. And I've done a lot of coaching without horses too. So people who've got issues with their boss, with a colleague, want to make a career change, or maybe they are having relationship issues, or finding that they're not being taken seriously. So internal personal power is one way you could describe that. So I do typically with coaching, it can be a few sessions. I've done as few as 4 with a client who got what she wanted, was extremely excited about the fact that it took so little time. And other people who I've worked with over the period of a couple of years. I do coach groups, and it's part of my business model to work with teams. I've been doing some one-day workshops, and I'm planning a 3-day workshop for this coming fall. And, and I've never had a person go away without having had an aha experience, being overjoyed, being, completely fulfilled, or wanting more frequently. Horses just have this amazing ability to make us feel better. I've also worked a lot with people who are afraid of them, and usually within a single session, bringing a level of fear on a scale of 1 to 10 from 11 down to 1. Yeah. And
what's it like working with a group? Would the group come in with a specific goal in mind, something that they want to overcome together, or a way that they want to work closer?
That's possible. It's also sometimes just let's get out of the office and have a time together doing something that's different. Instead of being at a desk and talking across a desk, I do exercises with groups that enable conversations to occur between people, but that are not as perhaps personal. In other words, I'll have one person work in the round pen with a horse, and the others will observe, and they'll be looking for certain kinds of, they'll be providing feedback as to what they saw to the person. And it's a way of getting at things that we must know about each other in a non-conflict way. So, for instance, I can see how you were working with the horse, and I could see your energy in a way that I've never seen it before. I could see you might have been struggling with the horse because the horse wasn't doing what you asked it to, and I might struggle as well. So I can empathize with what you were going through. Or I could see that you weren't giving that horse clear communication. And so those are the kinds of things that... I also do some exercises with people where we take a small group of people and a horse and say walk through a bit of a small obstacle course or something. So it requires a real sophisticated level of awareness and teamwork to walk a horse through a particular path. without using ropes again.
Wow, fascinating. So I guess, excuse me, the thing I really am curious about is, you've done a little bit of this, but I'm just wondering if there are more that kind of come to mind of just really powerful moments that you have witnessed between either a person or a group and a horse or a group of horses.
I guess there are too many to enumerate, but I could say, for instance, the experience that I had on Monday with that woman. I wasn't doing a lot of executive coaching with her, but in terms of coaching her to make her presence worthy enough for this alpha mare to respect. And seeing her, when I saw her again, when she called me about 6 weeks ago, and seeing her after a little over a year, she was like a different woman. She had a presence about her that I hadn't seen before. So before, she was feeling defeated. She was afraid of the horse. She was feeling intimidated, feeling hopeless, and afraid because she didn't want this horse. She didn't want to sell this horse. She was really desperate to find a solution. And so the person that I met a couple of months ago was standing taller, feeling much more herself, who she was, feeling her power. And not from a perspective of trying to put power over somebody, but having power in who she was. The level of assertiveness to manage a 1,200 or 1,300 pound mare was a beautiful thing to watch. And it's a reinforcing activity, right? The more respect she gets from that mare, the more she deserves it and feels it herself. And it spills over into her relationships. And I could see that because she had her daughter come out on Monday to watch. And her daughter was seeing the difference as well. I've seen other cases where working with a couple of people and a horse, where one person went in and did an exercise with a horse and experienced little resistance at all. And so her experience was, she was ecstatic about being able to go and ask a horse to do this, and the horse complied with very little resistance. And the next person went in and the horse was like, I'm not touching this. I'm not going near you. The horse wouldn't budge. And again, it's seeing the horse react and respond uniquely to each person. Another case of a woman, I had a workshop last fall, and a woman went into this round pen, and this particular place, I know these horses pretty well. She went in to the round pen with the horse, and I usually go in with them, especially at first. The horse stood there while we talked, and she told me a little bit about what she wanted to do. The horse leaves us, trots off, and in a round pen, it's a fairly big round space. She trots off to the left, rides all the way around the outside or around the edge of the round pen, trots right up to this woman like this. And this woman was like, she was a little bit nervous, and I said, are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. The horse, without saying another word, trots off, goes off again, and does exactly the same thing. Comes trotting around right up to this woman. I swear I've never seen the horse behave like this before. So she trots right up to this woman who's like this. And so the second time she did it, I started to ask this woman about her ability to stand her ground. And was that an issue for her in her life? And she said, yeah. And so horse goes off, time number 3. And I said, well, this time when she's coming around, anticipate and get her to stop farther away, get her to respect your space. And so time number 3, the horse comes trotting up to her. This woman does this, and the horse stops instantly and respecting her space. So like within the first 5 minutes, a huge lesson learned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. something you said earlier, I wanted to come back to. When you say you can see the energy, are you literally seeing things like, or is it just something that you're sensing? Can you see energy fields? And
I don't, but I know what I meant was that some people think horses can. Our energy fields, they're measurable. The electromagnetic field that we produce is measurable, but I don't see them.
Okay.
I mean, I think there are people who say they see auras. Right. That's probably what they're seeing.
Right. So, but yeah, I'm just referencing a comment you made earlier and just wondering what you meant when you said "I see." You meant, it's just kind of what anyone would see with the awareness that you have.
Yes. So when I talk about seeing energy, I'm talking about the manifestation through body language, through tone of voice, through movement, and all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Now, I don't know where this question is coming from, but I'm glad that it's come into my consciousness to ask you: do horses have a sense of humor?
Yes, they do.
Tell me about that. I don't know what made me want to ask you that, but I'm just curious to hear what you would say about that.
I think they do. And I'm trying to recall that I've had a couple of instances when I had to stop and look and think that was a joke.
Wow.
They're very playful. And in fact, I think something that most people don't understand about horses is that they sleep very little. They're designed to eat most of the time, sleep very little because they're prey, and that they spend all of their free time together playing leadership games. They're always testing each other. So are you the boss of me, or am I the boss of you? And those, you see them nipping each other, or, moving their butts up to, to the other's face, or just all of that, two heads going up, the teeth together. And it's a game. For the most part, it's a game. They play it all the time. And I believe it's a survival strategy. It's to make sure that you're always paying attention and that you're always aware. Because that's the only survival strategy, the main survival strategy that a prey animal like them has. They don't have caves or homes. They're designed to live out in the open. And their strategy is to run by having seen a predator from a distance. So, or having seen a predator from a distance, be able to tell if that's a hungry predator or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, how has working with horses healed you?
Well, I think it's taught me an enormous amount about myself and the process that I go through and that I coach people to go through is by spending time with them, because there's no hidden agenda. When you're with a horse, what you see is what you get. For me, it enables me to go inside in a reflective way, to observe what's going on for me, to become conscious of what's going on for me, and to understand what my motivation is, and to question assumptions. So it's enabled me to come to understand myself and people better. It's enabled me to let go of a lot of judgments. It's enabled me to like and understand people better. As I mentioned earlier, the whole business of having a hidden agenda created issues for me in my younger life. Not being able to understand why people did things they did, or see it coming, that sort of thing. I mean, with some people you can, but there are always people that are mysterious. So it's a very meditative experience. It's a healing experience. And again, there are organizations that are measuring this. So when you spend time with a horse, your oxytocin levels, your feel-good hormones go up. And so that alone is a wonderful healing mechanism. But it's also been important for me to, as I said, learn what their perspective is, and learn their viewpoint and how to look after them from their perspective. That's been really instructive for me, and it's changed me.
There's one last question that I want to ask. Well, I'm always, whenever I'm doing these shows, I'm always thinking about the 4 questions or the 4 points I like to make in my talk. So, starting from where you are, there's some kind of pivotal point. Who helped you along the way? So obviously there were many, many people who guided you and gave you encouragement and insight. The third one I think is kind of the most, it gets answered in and of its own accord in every conversation, and that is, why do you persist with this? The sheer joy of the work, I think, and the insights that you gain personally, as well as the insights that the people for whom you work, the insights that they come away with, both about horses and about themselves. But here's a question that I haven't asked you yet, and that is, inevitably there's, I call it the be grateful for the process point, meaning, we all experience setbacks, we all experience challenges on the way, which ultimately turn out to be blessings, because the lessons that they teach us move us forward in a way that just moving in a straight line would not have, certainly not in as rich a way. So when I say that to you, what are some of the difficulties, challenges you've had on this route? Besides, the obvious one that I could think of as you were going forward is, gee, I have this desire and I have no idea what the structure of it is. Yeah. You were literally kind of blazing your own trail with this and other people were awakening to that energy simultaneously. But aside from that, what other challenges did you face or come to mind?
I remember fondly, I'm not somebody who likes to fail at something, but when I first started, learning to speak horse, it's a Canadian fellow. There's an American woman and a Canadian fellow who've been my greatest instructors, and he's the most amazing person to watch with horses. Somebody said horses treat him like a god. Because he knows them so well. He knows their language so well. He knows how to speak so well to them. And I've just been fascinated to watch him and learn from him all these years. When I first started, I started with one of his students, and she was a wonderful woman who taught me something, a bit, just enough to be dangerous. And then I went to a clinic up in Vernon where there was about a dozen people in a big arena. And there was a bit of learning theory in the morning, and then we all went into this arena with all these horses. So there's people all over the place, lunging horses and walking horses and riding horses. And I, who don't own my own horse, I don't have property to work with horses. I've never been into a round pen with a horse, never lunged a horse, because I don't have the opportunity, first of all, at that stage of my life. I did later, but so I was so bad at learning this stuff, and it was so humiliating to be trying to learn how to do all this stuff in front of other people and failing miserably. But it wasn't going to stop me. It was just I had to know this, and I had to build skill, and it was several years of humiliating, poor performance before I got to the place where I actually could start to demonstrate some level of skill with it. So that was a challenge. And all I can say is that passion and the desire outweighed the pain.
Right. Right.
And even now, when I think about in the face of challenges, because I would like to have my own horse again. I did for a while, and that was hugely instructive as well. But when I think about stopping, I think, and then what would I do? Unless there's a greater passion that's going to come along and take up my attention, I'm going to be doing this. So,
well, I'm sure you're getting that loud and clear. That's great. So thank you for answering all those questions. And my next one is, what's next? Where are you going? What's your vision for the next period of time, whatever that may be, months, years?
Well, I'm writing a book.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to have it out by early October. And because it's so hard to explain to people what I do.
Mm-hmm.
The book is going to be a way for my message to get out before me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that that's going to be a success. And I'm starting a new collaboration with a coach from France, who she coaches people who do TED Talks and like stage presentations.
Mm-hmm.
And she did a little bit of coaching with horses and is fascinated. And so we're putting a beautiful workshop together. It's going to be a 3-day. And we're going to spend part of the time using the experience with horses as they teach us about our presence and our nonverbal communication, and our ability to command a space. That's going to have a nice overlap with the work that she does in terms of helping people get to that level of presenting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited about that. So we're going to offer that for the first time in the fall. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to collaborate and do that kind of workshop in other places as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Of course, I have an image in my head now of the two of you doing a TED Talk and a horse walking out on stage with you.
I want to do that. I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to do a TED Talk with a horse, and I've got the horse in mind. Yeah.
Wow. So that would, I was going to say that would take a bit of effort, but gee, they're doing TED Talks in Vancouver now, so you wouldn't have to take the horse on a plane or anything. So that would be good.
Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, gee, Evelyn, I'm just delighted that you were willing to say yes to having a chat about your passion and share it with everybody. And is there anything that I haven't said, anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to share to feel complete about our conversation?
No, but I'd be happy if anybody wants to look me up.
Yes.
And ask more questions. I'd be happy to.
So let's mention your website, which is equinecoach.ca, equinecoach.ca.
Yeah.
And on there, now when we spoke a couple of days ago, you said there's something on there. Is it a questionnaire? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, there's a self-assessment called the Eightfold Path of Equus. So it's a little salute to Buddhists. To Buddha and the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
But it's a self-assessment for people to look at where they are in their life if they're thinking about coaching and where they might want to put their priorities. And several dozens of people have taken it, and I've gotten some good feedback about it. So it's free, complimentary, and I don't see it unless the person wants to send a copy to me. I don't see it, so it's completely confidential.
And for people who would like to work with you, you have your contact information on the site, your email address, your phone number, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, and I want to thank you, Nathan. I really enjoyed meeting you. It was a wonderful opportunity on Saturday to have dinner and get to know each other a bit.
It was. Thank you.
I very much admire this Small Steps, Big Life that you've got going. It's fabulous.
Well, I'm happy about it. It's something that really is an important message for me. And, we teach most what we need to learn. And being a recovering perfectionist, as I'm fond of describing myself, being reminded that taking small steps is the way home, seems to be the most effective tool that I have found to contradict my own perfectionism. Specifically, when we try to do big things, we get overwhelmed. So the only way that we move forward is by taking the small steps. And if we can break things down, then that's when we can feel, joy and success and, self-love, all those important ideas, which, get squashed when we're trying to be everything all the time to everyone, So I'm happy that I'm figuring out a way, as they say, to turn my mess into my message, and also to find ways to kind of deliver it in ways that are helpful to other people, including this show. So thank you very much for being part of that.
Well, thank you again.
Pleasure. So don't go away. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody and then pause the recording so you and I can talk for a little bit more. So thank you very much for watching, folks. I hope you found the last hour as enchanting as I have. I love the work Evelyn does, and I hope that you love her, or that you think of someone in your life would benefit from working with Evelyn, or at the very least that Evelyn inspires you to live your life more fully. And once again, her website is equinecoach.ca, equinecoach.ca, and she is in the Vancouver area. Do you do your work in the Southlands area still?
I do some work there and some in Langley.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So for those of you not in the Vancouver area, both of those spots are what we call in the greater Vancouver area or the lower mainland. But even if you're not geographically close, I'm sure there's a way that Evelyn could still work with you.
I do coach over Skype, and yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So don't let geography get in the way. So once again, thank you for watching. Peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.